Welcome to Journaling with Nature, the podcast for those who want to turn curiosity into wonder, a pencil sketch into a rabbit hole of discovery, a moment of stillness into a life full of joy. I'm your host, Bethan Burton. Let's open the pages of our nature journals and explore this world together. Hello, this is episode 62. Before I tell you about today's guest, I want to mention a wonderful new nature journaling group that's recently been started, especially for teen nature journalers. Teens often get overlooked and content is usually created for young children or for adults, but maybe not for this age group. Amaya Shreve, who's been on this podcast and also taught a class at International Nature Journaling Week, has teamed up with a friend to start a group that is especially for teenage nature journalers. They're having a special launch party for their group, which all ages are welcome to attend, and it's via Zoom. And at the launch party will be Isaiah Scott, who is another inspirational teen journaler who has been on this podcast. Isaiah will be a guest speaker and he'll talk all about his experience and give a demonstration. And the launch party will be on November 13th at 12 noon Pacific time. So if you are a teenage nature journaler, or if you have teenagers in your life and you think they might enjoy this group, check out the show notes where you'll find a link to the details of the launch party as well as the Facebook group. I love seeing young folks creating their own spaces and projects like this. It's so inspiring. They make me feel positive about the future. So today's guest is someone who I've been following for a long time on Instagram and I've developed a friendship with over time, and it was such a lovely experience to have the chance to talk with her for the show. Ginn Barber is an artist who's inspired by nature. The thing that drew me to her work initially was the way she captures landscapes and skies. She's also passionate about colour and her pages are filled with colour swatches and colour notes. We talked all about her art process and how making art outdoors connects her with nature. Let's listen. Ginn, thank you so much for being here with me. It's a real treat to chat with you today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I know you through Instagram. I love what you do there. Your page is so inspiring and full of life. And I just want to first say, wow, about what you do.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm wondering about art and where it started and whether you have kept that art going from since you were a child. Were you a big art fanatic when you were young?
I was always interested in art, so it was something that my father quietly fostered. You know, he would come home and bring me a sketchbook, my first sketchbook, art supplies, a book on nature, a book on birds, a book on honeybees, things like that. But then there was my mother who basically told me, "Oh, why are you wasting your time? You don't have any talent in this."
Oh, no.
No, really. And I thought, you know what? Eventually, though, I didn't let her opinion hold me back too much because I kept going back to it over and over again. And there was my father bringing me to different art stores. Anytime I wanted to go to an art store and look at some art supplies, he would do that. So I was thankful that I had that, you know? And then, we had our landscaping done when I was about 9. And then I remember going around with the landscaper, asking him so many questions with this little book I made by myself. I was like, "What plant is that? And what is it called?" And he would tell me. He was so patient. He told me about it. I tried my best to do little sketches of it and just, write things about the plant that he told me about and where it was planted in our garden. So, that was probably my first nature journal.
That's amazing. So you've always been interested in nature as well, right from the start. Did you have nature around you a lot?
Yes. So my grandparents and my mother, they were all into orchids. And I was dragged to all these different orchid shows when I was a kid. And, like being surrounded by all those green, glossy leaves and like those incredible scents from the orchids, like different types of scents, fruity, like perfumey, something like rose or citrus. I mean, it just becomes this whole memory. And the colors and everything, you just want to sit there and somehow, someday, I would love to capture that, So it sort of just permeates into you, I suppose.
Wow. And so, how did you maintain your love of art? Did you study art when you were in college, or have you just learned by doing?
I eventually did. So first in college, I started out in accounting,
Mm-hmm.
but I took the random like art class, right, just to fill in my credits, and then eventually I thought, oh, I really still really really like this. So the next time I had an opportunity to go back to school, I went back to school for art. But that is not where I actually learned how to do art.
Okay.
It was through a botanical art program at a local arboretum in Chicago. That's where I learned that, and interestingly, a calligraphy class, a year-long calligraphy class with this wonderful teacher named Reggie Izell. And just the way he taught and the heart that he put into his teaching and his students and the way he taught you about materials, it just really reawakened the love of art for me. And I think he really did set me on my path. Every time I see him, I'm like, thank you so much for being that person for me. So
That sounds incredible, to dedicate so much time to calligraphy and have that expand into art in general. And tell me about the class you mentioned before that, the local one.
oh, the botanical illustration
Art.
program. Yes. So the local arboretum, Morton Arboretum in Chicago, they used to have a program for a botanical illustration certificate. I took it nearly all the way to the end, except I think they closed the program before I was able to finish. I had like one or two classes left.
Oh.
So I wasn't able to actually get the certificate. But most of the instructors there were just incredible. The way they taught you about pencil, graphite, watercolor. I mean, they taught you like the English method of watercolor. And I had, prior to that, it was just basically, wet on wet, doing washes, nothing quite as precise as what they were doing. So it was really interesting to learn their method of doing things. And I learned so much from that program.
Tell me about what's the English method?
Oh, it's really slow, and you kind of lay down washes
Okay.
and glazes, and sometimes you do a lot of like dry brushing. So it's not like the fast, kind of apply water and then drop in color. So that's the fast way of doing it, and then everything sort of moves along with the water. But I guess what they call the English method is more controlled, so it's
Okay.
more suitable for botanical subjects.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And so a lot of your subjects in your art now is nature focused. And I'd love to know about nature and why it's so inspiring, why it's such a big, important theme in your art.
I normally blame a steady diet of Rangeric magazines from when I was a child. It was a huge influence in my life, like reading about nature all the time.
Yeah.
And then I spent a lot of summers exploring the beach and the rivers by my grandmother's house, like every summer. So, you're wandering around in this like moss covered river rocks and, coconut palm trees by the beaches. And it was just a fascinating place. There were all these like little marine creatures kind of scurrying around. And, I was always underneath there with my goggles looking at everything. So, I mean, being so surrounded by nature, you can't help but being inspired by all of that goes on around you. And I was always such a curious child. Like, I would pretend I'd do experiments. Like I would tie, I don't know, baby oil to, it had no basis whatsoever in science. I would tie bags of baby oil to leaves going, I wonder what that's going to do.
Oh, wow.
But, I mean, we had like a little club to do like experiments on,
Yes,
on
that's
nature.
amazing. I'm really fascinated by this idea that time spent in nature as a child cements something inside you that you take with you for the rest of your life. Would you say that that was true for you?
Yes, definitely. Because, I mean, so I spent 14 years growing up in the Philippines, surrounded by all this nature. And then we moved to Chicago, which is a very, very urban landscape. And I think those years of being in nature sustained me through all those years of being away from it. And it wasn't until I moved here to Washington about 5 or 6 years ago that I felt like I was immersed in nature again. So.
Mm. Can you set the scene for nature around you? When you step outside your door, what do you see?
Around here, there's definitely a lot of very, very tall conifer trees. That was the one thing that was most, I guess it was a marked difference for me from being in Chicago, where there's a lot of maple trees, a lot of oak trees. And then I come here and I can't identify anything. Everything is a conifer that I'm not familiar with. And then not too far away from that, you end up in Puget Sound, which is an estuary.
Okay.
And that's very different from living in Lake Michigan, which is a freshwater lake. So it's sort of nice to be in that environment where you could go over there and see tide pools, you could see eelgrass where salmon spawn, and then if you're really, really lucky, maybe you'll see one of the local resident orcas, so it was really nice moving here.
That is special. And you also have a wide range of different subjects. You do portraiture, you do all sorts of things, and I'm wondering about how you choose what to paint next. Do you just feel it? Do you wait to be inspired? Tell me about how you choose your subjects.
I think I go through certain phases where I'm very, very interested in one thing. It could be landscapes, and then I'll sit there and do a whole bunch of landscapes until the next thing catches my attention, and then I'll try to do that. It's always to try to challenge myself. Like for a while, if I thought, okay, you know what? I haven't done portraiture in a while, and I really should try and see how I'm doing with that. So I'll do portraits for like 60 days or something like that. Do one every day, and the thing is, they don't always have to be successful.
Yes.
You just need to do it. Certain days it'll be fine. Certain days you kind of laugh at the result, but to me, it's all okay. You learn something.
It's a process.
It is.
Yeah. And you also do nature journaling, and you do nature art and nature journaling, and I'm wondering about those two things and how they are similar and how they're different for you.
Oh my goodness. I think I'm the worst person to ask about that because I feel like the line is very much blurred with me. And I do always feel like it's about intention. If I'm trying to capture a certain cloud formation that grabbed my attention, that's nature journaling to me. Or particularly when I'm trying to catch the colors of the dawn, which I've been doing a lot of over the summer. I'd wake up early in the morning and see how beautiful the sunrise is, and I'm sitting there quickly trying to jot it down. So if all I have is the temperature, the date, the time, to me that's a type of nature journaling. Whereas nature art, for me anyway, that's usually me carrying around my bigger setup, my plein air easel, and going out there and capturing a landscape. It's different, like I'm trying to produce a painting. And then for me, nature journaling is for myself and for my own curiosity.
Yes, that's so interesting. And in nature journaling, we often talk about using words, pictures, and numbers. And I feel like when you go out and see a cloud that touches you and you want to capture it, that's you doing nature journaling with the focus on the pictures. And then you might just add whatever information you feel like. But so for some people, the words is the big thing with nature journaling, and others, it might be numbers. Some people love exploring numbers, but for you, I feel like the pictures is the focus and the other stuff is additional.
It is.
Does that make sense?
It is. But what's funny? I feel like when I do take the time to sit there and paint, I absorb a scene more, and later on I can actually write about it. that thing I was telling you about where I recorded something that I had written for public radio, that was based on an experience where I went there to paint. But then I was so immersed in the scene that you just become part of it. It becomes embedded inside you. And then later on, you can pull that experience out and write about it. And it's so vivid because you took the time to sit there, and just be in the moment because you were painting, that you could dredge up all of these memories so easily. So it also informs my writing, which to me was really exciting.
Yeah, that is really interesting. And I love that about the process of putting something on paper. It draws the experience into you in a way that's really, really cemented inside you, doesn't it?
I agree.
Yeah. And when you talked about the sunset and the clouds, something that was speaking to you, it made me think about this question that I sometimes ask people, which is whether this is a head thing or a heart thing. And I'm wondering for you about whether this whole process of nature, art, nature journaling is a practice of the head or the heart, or whether that's nonsense and it's both.
I think for me, it's definitely the heart. I'm usually a very heart-led person.
Yeah.
And I follow wherever my heart leads me, whatever sparks my curiosity, which is probably why I also have not as much data as some people, is because it is a very heart-led thing for me. It's about what captures my eye, what sparks my curiosity, what piques my interest. That's what ends up in my nature journal.
I'd love for you to talk a little about your process of painting outside. So a lot of people have very small kits, but some people have very big kits, and some people sit on the ground, some people sit on a chair. I'd love to know the details of your plein air painting and how you go about it.
So I was thinking about that one day, and it really is dependent upon where I'm going, what day it is, how much energy I have, and how much gear I'm willing to take with me. I mean, there are times when I think, okay, that's not very far from the car. I can take everything. I mean, I could take my easel, I could take my pochade box, I could take a chair, an extra little table, everything, and be quite comfortable. And then there are times when I know I'm hiking and that we're going to go a lot further than I'm used to. I'll probably have hiking poles or something like that. In that case, I have a very lightweight kit that I can use standing up, and I don't need a chair. I don't need any of that stuff, and still be able to paint.
Tell me about your kit. Do you have a small one? Do you have one that's got a ring that goes around your finger? What's your actual kit for doing it on the run?
Okay, so most of the time when I am hiking a good long ways, it's something very small. It's probably a pocket-sized watercolor book, and I have a small watercolor kit like the Art Toolkit Pocket Palette or their Demi Palette, or Portable Painters Micro, which I've been using lately as well. Just something easy so I could clip everything onto my sketchbook, and a Coroplast board similar to what Roseanne Hansen uses, and like have my little collapsible cup and a brush, and I'm good to go. Maybe a pencil. That's it.
Some people use water brushes, and I myself don't like them. I find them difficult and temperamental. And I'm wondering, you said that you have a travel brush, and I'm wondering about that. Have you tried water brushes? Did you reject them? And about the brushes that you use?
I've tried both. I went through a very long period where all I used was a water brush because I was determined that I would make friends with a water brush. And then I go through periods of just using an actual brush. But when I say travel brush, the ones that you can pull apart and it protects the head of the brush, that.
Yes.
I like the regular brush just a little bit better because you can control your washes a little bit better. I feel like I don't have what it takes to make a nice even wash with a water brush, even though I love the convenience of it.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like I want to do it.
I know.
It's so funny because, everyone's raving about water brushes and I think, yeah, I'm going to do it. It'll be so convenient. And I just don't like it. And then I think, that's okay.
I know. And you know what? Trying different ones sometimes helps. And then sometimes when they get a little older and a little more clogged where they don't squirt water out as much or as readily, then it's better. But having said all of that, I still tend to gravitate towards the other brushes.
Yeah, I have a little concern about the plastic as well, that
Yes.
I don't want to generate more plastic than needed. And that if you buy a good quality brush, it lasts for a really long time. But I find that the water brushes don't last a long time.
They really
and I
don't.
Yeah.
Although I do have one that's 20 years old and it looks pretty bad, but I still carry it around. I don't know why.
In your big kit, you said you take if it's the right moment. Do you have all sorts of stuff that you probably don't need?
Probably. Although, you know what? This year, though, I have gotten pretty good at paring down what I don't need. Mm-hmm. Like I went on so many hikes this season that I thought, you know what? I really don't need that. And my back starts aching if I walk too far. So then, I just end up leaving it the next time. And if I don't miss it, then I guess I didn't need it in my kit. Yeah. I'm getting better.
And are you, I was talking to a guest recently about sketchbook addiction. And I'm wondering if you have the same issue.
I did not buy a very large sketchbook yesterday. I also did not have 2 more journals come in today. No, not at all. I don't suffer from that at all.
Do you have this thing of experimenting? Oh, different shape, different size, different paper?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I will sometimes put watercolor on the most atrocious paper that shouldn't even take watercolor, but I'll try it anyway just because.
Yeah. Do you have favorites? Have you sort of settled on one size or shape that you love most, or are you still experimenting?
There's some paper that I like more than others. Mm-hmm. My absolute favorite before used to be Pentalic Aqua, but I'm not sure if it's still in production. So the few that I have left, I'm being very careful with.
You have to hoard them.
I do. I am hoarding them. And, after that, I think like lately I've been carrying around the Stillman and Byrne mixed media, the gray notebook. That's sort of my main nature journal. And then I also use the Stillman and Byrne Aqua. And then, like some of the smaller handbook travel log.
I love the handbook ones. That's actually my favorite.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you have different ones for different things. So do you have a nature journal one? Do you have a landscape one? I'm wondering how you organize what you put in each journal.
Yeah, so if I am going through a serious one, I will usually have a sketchbook that's just all landscape. Yeah. But then there are those times when, oh my gosh, it's 4 a.m, here comes the sun, it's beautiful, I can't find my sketchbook, and it becomes whatever is closest to me that I can get to without tripping on my husband or the cat or anybody that's still sleeping. That will be the sketchbook.
That is cool. Do you wake up deliberately? Do you set your alarm to get up for the dawn, or are you just a natural morning person?
I think when we wind up going to Montana, I just naturally wake up around dawn because I am always so curious about what dawn will look like coming up over the mountains and over the water. And it's just every day, it's just slightly different. And it's so exciting to see what it does. And it's so exciting to try to sit there and quickly try to get it down because every 5 minutes it changes.
That's great. Do you know, I rarely get up for the dawn. I'm not at all a morning person, and I do a lot of my work in the night, and so I don't get up with the dawn, but sometimes you just have to for whatever reason. And every single time I wake up with the dawn, I always think, this is gorgeous, I should do this all the time.
Right?
And I never do, but I always think that this is beautiful.
I understand. I used to be a night owl. I mean, I don't even know what part of me is waking up at dawn nowadays, but I'm glad because I do have a few of these beautiful dawn scenes.
Yeah, so you mentioned capturing a landscape or a skyscape quickly, and I'm wondering about your process. Do you mix all the colors first and then splash them down? What's your process for capturing something quickly outside?
Usually, if I know that there's a lot of clouds, then I'll usually have a clear water wash over the sky area first. So then I can sit there and do my variation of blues and then drop them in. And then I can move them around. I can remove parts with, paper towel or something like that. And, then add the gradations of colors wherever I see them. Yeah, there are times that I've forgotten to pre-mix, and that does get in the way of working quickly, but you learn as you go on, and if you keep doing it every day, you realize, okay, maybe I should have a few pools of different colored blues that are ready. But there's still challenging colors like peach. That peach that you get in the morning. Oh, I am still forever chasing that peach color.
What sort of mixes do you try when you're trying to capture that beautiful peach color?
I've tried, I think, like a Monte Amiata natural sienna with a little bit of quinacridone rose, but sometimes it's a little too strong. So I'm still trying to find sort of a pinkish color that won't overwhelm the yellow base that I'm using. So I've tried like maybe buff titanium and maybe rhodonite or something like that. So this is an ongoing thing for me. I have so many little squares in my notebook. Okay, is that the peach? Nope. Is that the peach? Nope.
Well, let's talk about color, because I am passionate about color. I love talking about color. I had Jane Blundell on and we just talked about color for an hour and 20 minutes. And I know that color is a big part of your art expression, and that you love to do color swatches and swatch out palettes and all that. And I'd love to talk about color and what it means to you and your work. And let's just go down this rabbit hole a little bit about color.
Okay. I have a friend that always says, color swatches, that's your happy place. And it's so true. I don't even realize I could spend hours with just making mixes and making swatches and making notes. I like mixing two colors. I like mixing two colors and then adding a third color and then noting what happens. I like comparing different shades of yellow to see, okay, which one do I want to introduce into my palette or to replace a color that isn't quite working. So, color is just, I have so many tubes, Bethany.
Another addiction.
It's terrible. I started with only a few tubes. But you know what, though? Lately, I've been also trying to go out with just a limited palette of 6 colors. And actually, that's been working pretty well. I'm actually very surprised.
How do you choose your 6?
So lately, because of the time of the year, I was in Montana, and there was a lot of rain and a lot of gray going on. I settled on something that was like an earth red, an earth yellow, a convenience green, like a Zap green, something grayish, like a Payne's gray or something like that. There was white, just in case you always want some titanium white. And I can't think of, there's 6 colors and I can't think of the other one right now. But it was a very limited palette, and I was surprised at what you could actually do with such a limited number of colors.
And what's the value of limiting it? What do you find when you limit your palette? What's good about that as opposed to just having every choice?
Sometimes the decisions are just easier. You know, I only have the one yellow, so I can make that cooler, warmer, darker, or lighter. Whereas, and my other palette has 33 colors in it. And that to me is my happy place. My sky colors are all in there. My ever important lavender is in there, and that was sort of like a new addition for skies specifically, was that lavender color.
Ooh, so tell me about skies, because we have this new thing called the Skyscapito Appreciation Society, and you were there at the meeting, and everyone was just chatting about skies, and I know that skies are really a big part of your work, and I'd love to hear more about that. Skies, what they mean to you, and your favorite colors and all that stuff about skies.
It is, I never realized that what attracted me the most to landscapes, aside from the water, are
Mm.
the skies.
Mm.
And I probably focus mostly on the skies, and the rest of it is window dressing for the sky. And I mean, I can't help it. There's the Cloud Appreciation Society. I
Yes.
go in there and I just look at the variety of shapes and, the tall cumulus clouds. That reminds me of my childhood. I feel
Mm.
like clouds like that only form above large, large bodies of water. When I was in the Midwest, we didn't have clouds that looked the same as when they form above an ocean.
Wow, that's an
So
interesting observation.
yeah, so I was so excited when I moved here. I felt like, oh my gosh, I get to see these wonderful, huge clouds again. And then you get drawn back into all of these landscapes of beautiful clouds. And I couldn't help it. I just started painting them and I just felt such joy trying to capture different kinds of clouds. And let me tell you, there is a man right now that posts all these photos of his retirement home in the Philippines. And they're these gorgeous photos of clouds, and he lets people paint from them. And
Oh, wow.
oh my goodness, I'm just so thankful that he retired there. It's a little piece of home,
Ah, that's
and
beautiful.
the cloud parade is just incredible.
And how do you notice differences in the sky between the Philippines and the US? Like, do you notice changes in that way across countries?
I feel like sometimes the colors of the sky
Yeah.
is different. Even the kinds of blues that you need is different.
Mm.
Somebody could say, "Oh, cerulean blue." I really think that people in maybe your part of the world, their type of cerulean blue is probably slightly different from the ones that would reflect what a blue sky would look like here. So you always have to add like a little cobalt blue just to make it maybe,
Yes.
match what you see outside a little bit more. So, that's why I carry 5, 6 blues with me.
I love that. And tell me about the lavender. You said that was added to your palette because of the sky.
Yes. I realize that there's a lot of this, like at dawn, this purple band of color that happens, right in between the pinks and the peaches and that,
Mm. Mm.
dark blue up above. So I thought, okay, I need a lavender. And I saw that Daniel Smith had a lavender, but at the time that I needed it, I was going on a cruise. I didn't have time to get a tube. So I mixed my own lavender using whatever they said, PW6, a little ultramarine, a little ultramarine violet. I took my palette knife and I just made my own lavender. And I was staring at the swatch in their catalog online and tried as best as I could to
Matching.
match. And then, I had enough for like a little half pan. And I really liked the color. And then finally, somebody gave me an actual pan of real Daniel Smith lavender. I was pretty close. I was pretty happy.
That's cool. I like
Yeah,
that.
and it's a nice addition. So
Yeah.
when that runs out, I'll buy a whole tube of it.
And for those who don't do color swatching, tell me about the value of like getting to know your paints by swatching them out and seeing what they can do and practicing in that way.
I think if you don't swatch out your paints and paint mixes, sometimes you miss out on some incredible mixes that you didn't expect. Or you didn't expect some kind of strange granulation that happens between two colors. And how much of one color versus another color. That's the other thing. I try to kind of go middle of the road and have an even mix of the two and then try it with a little bit of one color versus a little bit of another color. And you do really get such a wide variety. And I feel like if you just say, oh, if I take a yellow and I take a blue, that makes green. But what kind of green? I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes there's like that sagey blue green that you just really want. And I never know how to make that until I went through this whole chart and I went, oh my goodness, I had no idea that that blue and that yellow would actually make that green that I've been looking for. So, I mean, I think there's real value in getting to know your colors and getting to do some mixes so that, when you're out there, you're prepared.
And it's just so beautiful. The finished result is so beautiful,
Yeah.
isn't it?
It really is.
And I'm wondering about, do you think a lot about the watercolor properties like granulation, transparency? Is that a big part of your work, or is that sort of secondary?
I used to just think, oh, I really need all transparent watercolors,
Yeah.
and then I took a workshop recently and he used a lot of cadmiums, interestingly enough, which is very opaque. And I thought, oh my goodness, I've been trying to avoid cadmiums forever
Yes.
now. And yeah, so I tried it for the sake of the workshop. And you do realize that, different properties bring something different to the
Yes.
painting. And lately, granulation, it's funny that you mentioned that. Granulation has been on my radar because, oh, just the unpredictability of the mixes and the kind of textures that you get. So that is my next rabbit hole. There is
The
a
next
painter.
series.
Yeah, there's a painter out there, and I think she's in Italy. And, she makes these wonderful mixes just from 3 colors. Just like an earthy yellow, an earthy red, and an ultramarine blue. And I couldn't believe the range of grays and beautiful colors that she got. So I thought, maybe I'll try that next.
I love it. I love that there's just this world of literally unending things to explore, and
So much possibilities, particularly with color.
absolutely, that's amazing. I love chatting with people who love color as well.
Oh, I'm glad you appreciate color. Oh, color, I love it.
I recently posted something and I'd done a line drawing that I was happy with, and then I just was like, I use a pocket palette as well, and my pocket palette was saying, add color, add color. I just can't leave it as a line. I don't know why. Maybe I should, but I always just add color.
That's my first instinct too, is just color. I think that's why Inktober is difficult for me.
Yes, well, that's good. Okay, so I wanted to ask you about art challenges, and Inktober is one very famous art challenge, but you've done a lot of different art challenges, and some people love art challenges, some people hate them, and it seems to be one thing that motivates you. And I'd love to know all about your experience with art challenges and how they're great fun and how they're difficult and all the details.
Okay, so here's the funny thing about art challenges. One of the reasons that I undertook an art challenge is partly because my mother always used to tell me, "You never finish anything,"
Oh.
which is such a funny thing. And I thought, you know what? I can do this. And so I started out with, somebody mentioned a 100-day challenge a few years ago. And I thought, wow, 100 days, that's a really long time. But I just decided, okay, this is day one of it. I'll just do something. I didn't put it on Instagram or anything, but I was really surprised I finished 100 days.
Wow.
And then the following year, my friend says, okay, it's starting again. And then at the last minute, I jump in again. And there goes another 100 days. And I thought, oh, okay, I can really do this.
Wow.
So that sort of motivated me to do that. And I think one time, the time that I was doing all those landscapes, it had become such a part of what I was doing in my daily life that after day 100 came and went, I think I kept going and wound up doing 152 days that year.
Wow.
It was interesting.
So it becomes integrated in your life in a way that feels very natural.
Yes, it sort of feeds itself. Having said that, though, sometimes, particularly with Instagram, there's a pressure to do something every day, to do something finished every day. And, that can be disheartening for some people. And then sometimes for me, you want to explore something that might take you multiple days. A painting that requires more details or, so then you realize, okay, after I do this challenge, then maybe I can devote time to do something that takes a little bit more time or over a longer period and have a more finished piece. Although some people are wonderful at doing it in one day.
I wonder how they do it, because I have committed to art challenges before and I never finish them. I always get into day 5 or 6 and it's just like, oh, this doesn't feel fun to me. it just feels like pressure and I don't want to do it, and I give up on it. And I'm so inspired by people who keep going, but I don't know how they do it.
But no, I understand that. And I think for our challenges, I feel like it should serve a purpose for you.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't feel good, and if it's not your thing, you tried it for a few days and it's not for you, I feel like people shouldn't feel guilty about just letting it go. And that is Inktober for me. I have tried so many years to do Inktober, and maybe because of the lack of color, it just never quite clicked, or because it's on the tail end of another month-long challenge.
Yes, tell me about the one you just finished, which is to do something outdoors for 30 days.
Well, it's actually to draw something or paint something from life for
from
30
life.
days.
Yes. Forgive me. Yeah.
It just so happens that many people are also plein air painters, so they'll go out. So for me, if I have the option of going out, I would rather go out and hike and sit on a rock and be out in my favorite subject. And then, on the days where you have low energy or you don't have time to go out like that, then maybe you grab something close by, like a cup.
Yes.
But I would much rather be outside and doing the big landscapes. And being immersed in the environment is so different. When you're sitting there and you're getting splashed by waves as you're painting, or an osprey just keeps flying by and screaming as you're painting, I think that adds to everything,
There's an element of excitement.
There really is.
So this challenge, tell me, it's organized by
Strata Easel. Actually.
Strata Easel, okay.
Yes. And the big motivation there is that, they give out such wonderful prizes, right? So they give out like 5 plein air easels. I think now they're giving out workshops, but I was always interested in the easels. And so I've been trying for years now to win one. It hasn't happened yet because more and more people join the challenge. But, at the very least, you've done 30 days of painting from life every single day. So you've gained something out of it.
That's wonderful. So that's in September every year? Is that right?
September and January each year. So they do it twice a year.
Okay. And then straight on the back of that is Inktober, where you're invited to use just ink to capture something along with the themes. And now everybody's doing their own prompt lists. And this year I was thinking, maybe I'll do it. Then I counseled myself, please don't do that, because you just never finish it. It's always awful. And then, but there is so many inspiring lists. And so I've said to myself, I will be inspired by several lists this month without any commitment to do it every day. So
I think that's the better way of doing it. Just pick and choose, see what speaks to you, and then do it in ink, and then you've done Inktober.
in my own way.
Yes.
Yeah. Art challenges, I want it to be fun and inspiring instead of a weight. And I guess that's what people need to find. I guess some people find the daily challenge fun and inspiring, and that's perfect. But if you're listening and you want to be inspired by art challenges but not feel any pressure, then maybe that's the way. Just do it when you feel and do it from whatever list is inspiring you. But let's give ourselves permission to not do anything that doesn't feel good.
I agree. And you know what? I admire the people that say do a challenge, but they don't do it every single day. They'll do 30 days, but they'll put it down for a couple of days. But they've still done 30. And that's 30 more than they would have, done if they didn't start it. So.
Yes, exactly. I'm wondering about your art practice and how it's changed over time. And you talk about having these sort of clusters of doing certain things, and I'm wondering about your process and how it's changed, and whether this sort of binge painting certain things has changed you, or how your art practice has evolved over time.
So when I was still working full-time, this is how it used to go. I used to read a lot of art books. I used to buy a lot of art supplies, but I would barely have any time to actually do any art. So it was always a lot of wishful thinking on my part. And then later on, I had a lot more time to devote to doing art. And then it sort of changes a little bit where you realize, okay, well, I can do this for longer periods of time. I can actually pursue avenues that I didn't before, which to me is exciting. Like right now, I keep thinking, okay, you know what? I have a whole bunch of these little studies that I did of landscapes. But now I want to get into making something much, much larger and not necessarily super realistic. You could still tell that it's a landscape, but it could be semi-abstract and a lot looser. So that's sort of the direction that I might pursue, if it's still interesting to me next month.
Yeah.
But, like I feel like now I have the time just to pursue all these different things because there's so many things to learn and there's so many different avenues to try. And I feel like I'm always a lifelong learner as well, that I don't know, that it's just so exciting to have all these different things that you could pursue.
Yeah, that is exciting, and to have the opportunity to do that and just follow your inspiration and your curiosity is such a beautiful way to do it.
Yeah, the whole follow your heart thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love that. I'm wondering about natural discoveries in your nature journal and what you've been finding out and investigating lately.
Let's see. For a while there in the summer, I had a few pages devoted to a lot of the wildfires that were happening in the area. There were some really big ones. So I had, things like paintings of what they looked like on certain webcams that I could find. Sometimes, information about the fuels or how long the fire had been burning, what area, the acreage that was involved in the fire. Then that gets a little too heavy sometimes.
Yeah.
And then, because there were times that I was up at the dawn, I would then start trying to make a note of which birds started singing at what time.
Yes.
And would that change depending on the weather? I was trying to see if I could keep track of it. But, to a certain extent, you realize, okay, some of these little birds start at this time. And then there's a certain time when the crows come and you could then hear them. And then a little bit later, the osprey would come in. And it was just interesting to see that every day, And then,
did you find that there was a regular pattern that this bird starts first?
It seemed like there really were the little ones would wake up early and then the crows would interrupt them. And then around 6:30 or so, the osprey would be up hunting. So
wow. That's amazing.
I found that to be fascinating. And I'm looking forward to going back and seeing what the pattern is now that it's fall and it's a different season.
Ooh, yeah, that would be so interesting to see who's waking up at what time across the seasons. That's amazing. I'm wondering about the whole process of documenting, say, the fires, and whether art itself and the expression of something so troubling can be its own way of processing, like processing the grief of the fires and all that stuff through art. Does that happen for you?
I think that was actually part of the reason I started it. It was so heavy, and everywhere in the West at that time, it seemed like everywhere you looked, there was a fire. There were fires in Montana, there were fires in Idaho, there were fires in Washington. And I just thought, I have to make sense of it all. So I picked a couple of fires that were really large, like the Dixie Fire, the Bootleg Fire, and then a local fire that was happening in Montana. And then I would just kind of write notes about it. And I felt like it helped me not feel so overwhelmed by it. And I always try to remember what Merriam-Webster usually says, fires are a normal part of the environment, it's part of renewal. And if I try to think of it that way, then it doesn't feel quite as devastating.
Yeah. And I think art can be a way of bringing in positive feelings as well. So like if we are feeling distressed about something, then we can deliberately focus on something that's joyful, like the dawn chorus, like the dawn, like capturing the colors of the dawn. That to me is another way. I think there's two ways you can process something really heavy, like with the fire, and then you can deliberately focus on something really joyful, like the dawn, like the colors around you, to sort of just bring in and foster those feelings of positivity and seeing something so beautiful around you in this world.
Yeah, I feel like I experienced that a lot in another thing that I try to track around here, which is our local southern resident orcas. There's one pod in particular, the J pod, that I don't know why, but I'm more interested in J pod more than the other ones. And I went through this whole period where I did their whole family tree to see
Oh,
who was still
wow.
around, and like the offspring of certain matriarchs of certain lines. And then it's sad to see when one of them goes missing. It's always so joyful when you see that, oh, this one is pregnant, or that one is pregnant, oh, that one just had a calf. We have two or three calves right now in the pod, and it's just it's that mixture of joy and sadness, and still
Yeah.
something interesting to keep tracking, because
Mm.
there's only three pods, and there are only 73 individuals left now for our local orcas.
Wow. And so are scientists tracking each group, and how do they get information about them, and how do you receive the information?
I follow so many different orca groups in
Mm-hmm.
Facebook, and they do have vessels that go out there. And
Okay.
if they get information from people saying, I think we spotted some of the residents, in this area, then the scientists will go and try to track them, and they'll give updates to the public, which is really, really nice, you know. And and I do get my information that way. If they say, well,
Yeah.
this individual is pregnant, then I'll make a note of it in my
That's
little tracking.
beautiful. I love that. I love that you know them so intimately, that you know who, like who's the mum of who and who's died and who's been born, and that's
Yeah.
beautiful.
I don't know if this got all the way to Australia, but do you remember a few years ago when one of the orcas mourned her calf for 17
Oh,
days? She carried him around for 17 days.
oh my
And I mean,
goodness.
to me, that was so heartbreaking. I mean, that's I mean, you don't think of a mammal like an orca
Yeah.
doing something like that, and yet she did. It seemed like
Wow.
she was mourning the loss of her calf. But that individual, Taliqua, she now has a new one, and they call
Oh,
him Phoenix. Which I think is so
wow.
wonderful.
That's amazing. I love that story. Oh, so if someone is interested in connecting with these stories of the orcas, they can find it on Facebook? Do they just search for, what would they search for if they wanted to get involved?
I think maybe if you look for southern resident killer whales, then you would
Mm-hmm.
find information on them, or orca, J pod, K pod, L pod.
Mm-hmm.
Then you would see our southern orcas, and they're very unique because they only subsist on the diet of salmon, whereas transient orcas, they tend to eat seals. So that's their
Oh,
diet, and it's interesting how they have their own language, their own dialect. So a transient orca and a resident orca don't understand each other.
wow.
Yes.
Okay, so these are words that I haven't really come across. So transient orcas are the ones that come and go from the area, and the resident ones that are the ones that stick around, and that's why you can get to know them so well.
Yes.
Wow.
More or
And
less. I mean, they have a larger range. The residents. I mean, they could probably go, all the way up to like Canada or Alaska, and then they, go down south. But still, they have a smaller range than the transients.
that's amazing. How long have you been getting to know them?
Well, I started because I did a beach watcher program, which is like a
Mm-hmm.
volunteer program for the marine and intertidal area here in 2017. And usually you get fascinated with what they call charismatic megafauna, which are
Yes.
whales and seals and things like that. But to love an orca is to love the environment that supports orcas, which
Mm,
means
mm.
you get into salmon conservation. You get to know that eelgrass is such an important thing for salmon and juvenile salmon and all the forage fish that salmon feed upon in order for them to feed the orcas.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's important to learn not just the one thing that you're in love with, but,
Mm-hmm.
what else is there in the food chain that affects them, and what can you do then in your community? Is it a stream that you could, maybe let people know you shouldn't wash your car because, in the driveway, because all of those chemicals get washed right into the sound. So, you start becoming more aware of things like that.
Yes, I'm so interested in that, about how nature journaling and falling in love with nature through these discoveries help you to be a better nature citizen, a
Yes.
better citizen for nature. Do you feel that that's something that people can grow through nature journaling?
I feel like they can. I mean, I really do feel like, what is that thing that they always say? In order to love something, or in order, to know
Yes.
something, you have to actually spend time with it, see it, be around
Yeah.
it. I think nature journaling gives us that opportunity to really learn and to really fall in love with nature,
Mm.
and just make it matter even more to us on a personal level.
Yes. That's exactly right. It's not out there, it's
It
here. It's
is.
something that's in relationship with us.
Yes, and getting to know animals as an individual. I was talking to
Mm.
somebody in a class about this. He's a photographer, but he tends to follow bears or wolves. And he said, after a while, you realize there's differences amongst them, and you get
Mm.
to know the individual, and then you just care so much more about, what happened to this fox and her kits this season and next season, and, did she was she able to raise them both successfully? Did she lose one? Will she have another, batch of kits the next season? It got to
Mm.
that point, and I think that's very important. It's not just, oh, foxes and wolves and bears and orcas. You get to know individuals, and then that just makes you a little bit more closer to nature.
And also that, yeah, a fox or a wolf doesn't exist without its environment, and so that becomes important, like you said, with the orcas and the salmon and what the salmon eat, and the whole system is important for that for that creature. That's been so fascinating. Thank you so much for being here with me, Ginn. It's great to hear these stories and to connect in this way. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Ginn. When I was re-listening to this interview, I realized just how much we laughed. It made me so grateful for these conversations and the chance to connect with people who live far away but are connected through something really deep, which is our shared love of nature and creativity. I enjoyed learning more about Ginn's art-making process. I've always been inspired by her beautiful landscapes and skyscapes, and you probably know by now that I do love talking about colour. Check out the show notes for a link to her Instagram page where you'll be able to see all her beautiful journal pages. Thank you so much for listening. See you next week.